So we're joined here by Matt Young, who is a developer in the Toronto market. And Matt, you've also started a an advocacy group in the real estate space called Can't. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing with that and what you're aiming to achieve?
Yeah, sure. So, kind of started, I would say, about pretty much about a year ago. We were gearing up to launch one of our projects and starting to just feel the sentiment in the market. People weren't feeling a lot of confidence. And we were having a lot of conversations with brokers and with buyers and getting a sense from them, how they were feeling. And I think the overall sentiment was that people didn't see the value in buying pre-construction real estate anymore. They thought the costs were too high. And, I think that coming off of what was a lot of irrational exuberance through the COVID period, I think, as interest rates went up, people were feeling the pinch. They were seeing how it was affecting their lives. And they were also losing confidence that prices would continue to go up over time, or at least over the kind of short to medium term. And so, we kind of took some stock into that and started looking at, okay, well, if you don't believe prices are at the right place and they need to be lower, how do we get them lower? Because it's not as simple as just dropping prices. These projects are generally underwritten to pencil to a certain return. There's been a lot of efficiency in the market, and so you can't just drop the prices without removing costs as well. And so we ended up going through this long exercise of figuring out, okay, what costs can be removed from a pro forma, what costs can't be removed from a pro forma. You can't just get rid of steel and concrete. You need to still build a good quality building. And it became really clear to us after going through a long exercise with our finance team that the number one thing that's changed in the last 15 years has been taxes. Taxes went from 12% of the cost of a typical condo in 2009 when I started in the business to roughly 30% of the cost of a condo today. And more importantly, the cost of that building has tripled, or the cost of that condo unit has tripled in price over that same, roughly 15-year period. So it became really clear to us that we've got a taxation problem in this business. And we started thinking a little bit more about how we could raise awareness around this issue, because it wasn't really being talked about for the last, I'd say before we started this, I would say over the last 2 or 3 years, all of the conversation was around supply. And that is a really important conversation to have. We definitely are undersupplied in this market, but the only way to build new supply is to make sure that the economics are such that you can build it and that people can buy those homes and feel good about buying those homes and build rental homes and everything else we need to do. But you have to build new stuff. And if people aren't willing to buy any new housing, you're not going to build any new supply. And so we have to get to the root cause of the problem, which is costs. And so we started this whole initiative really with the intention of changing the narrative in the country to be more tax focused, because we think that's the easiest way to bring costs in line and to get people buying homes again.
And Matt, you did that by revolutionizing a certain board game to a certain extent.
Yeah,
Yes.
I should have framed it better, because this is one of the most brilliant marketing campaigns that I've ever seen. I'm actually
really
going to share
is.
your guys' website for those people watching, but yeah, can you tell us a little bit?
Yeah,
About
so that was
the
actually
campaign
phase
itself?
two of the campaign. The first phase of the campaign was, we got a group of 20 builders together, and we all signed a pledge. And the pledge was that for every dollar of tax cut from the cost of delivering housing, we'll drop our prices dollar for dollar, because we wanted to really show the market that, nobody's looking for a handout here. We all want to do the right thing. We all just want to build housing. And we know that the prices need to come down based on what we're hearing from people. So the easiest way to do that is to pass those savings on to purchasers, make it so they feel good about buying housing again, that they see the opportunity again, and we can start putting shovels in the ground and building housing. So that was really phase one. That launched in August. And then, we started having discussions with government, and I'd say we had some productive discussions with government and some unproductive discussions with government, quite frankly. And so we said, okay, we're not really going to go away quietly here. And so we came out with a phase two of the campaign, which was, I'd say, a little bit more vocal and a little bit more highlighting the issue in a way that the average person would understand. And so the geniuses at Blackjet, who's a creative agency in Toronto, they really came up with this idea, which is let's make a board game that is unwinnable. After 3 or 4, it's a playable board game, by the way. And I know you got sent one, Dan, so I don't know if you've had a
Yeah.
chance to play it, but
Yeah, I'm going to be playing it with everybody over Christmas
yeah,
for sure.
it'll be a short game, I promise you.
If Monopoly wasn't frustrating and a long game already, Taxopoly, I can assure you, will increase that frustration.
You know what the beauty of this game is, though? You're equally frustrated together. And so you're kind of all miserable together, which is, I think, the sentiment we all feel in Canada right now. It feels like just everything is not going, in the right direction. It feels like everything is too expensive. I think overall, our governments generally have this scarcity mindset where they're all trying to take a bigger piece of a dwindling pie. And I think that's a failure in policy. And I think we have to get back to an abundance mindset, which is let's focus on growing the pie. And if we grow the pie, then everybody will do well. But if we can't grow the pie, then we've got a big problem. And I think it's evident that Dan, you constantly post really good charts and stuff online, and so you've seen the chart going around. What's happened 9 years ago compared to GDP in Canada compared to the US. And I think we all know what happened 9 years ago. So I'm not trying to be political here, but I'm just saying, like, policies are not working. And so I think people need to be objective about what's not working, what is working, and start to change course, because really people in government, their job is to be a public servant. Their job is to serve the will of the people and to make it as good for as many people in Canada as possible. And I don't think, if you ask, very, very few Canadians today would say that things are better today than they were 5 years ago, 7 years ago. So
Well, it is funny, right? Because you mentioned earlier on, like, the supply discussion, right? And the way that our housing market is formatted, at least in the GTA, is such that you can't have supply without demand. Like, excess demand in the resale housing market spills over into the pre-construction market. So, for example, if I'm an investor and I want to buy units and I don't want to pay X price to compete with the marginal buyer, I can go buy a pre-sale unit, and that deposit goes towards the creation of a new housing unit, either in the ground based or high rise market. And now we're seeing data come out from Altus, Urbanation, and Build, basically saying that Toronto new home prices are down, and condo sales are down, like, in the depending on the month that we're using, down like 70-80%, right, off peak, not from the average. And so this, to me, is going to be it's going to become a long-term supply constriction. It's also going to become a huge drag on GDP growth and construction, given how much of our GDP is dependent on this. You mentioned another thing in there that I wanted to talk about, because you had a very interesting answer to it in our conversation prior. So the thing is, you said we'll match the reductions in tax dollar for dollar, and we know that Vaughan is already actually committed already to doing this, and I commend you and the folks that you're working with for putting the pressure on them. I really think that's probably played a big role. But people were going to say, well, at least the biggest criticism I've seen is, why are the greedy developers gonna match this dollar for dollar reduction in development charges? And my answer to the question, when people ask me that, is, well, right now we know that units aren't selling at the price that they're at. And so the easiest way to sell a unit is to drop the price of that unit, right? I mean, you go walk by a store, you're more likely to buy something if it's on sale, right? And so if developers do that, they can now get a sale, which is how they make money and how they have a viable business. It's not really rocket science. The other part is, it's money they never would have saw to begin with, right? Like, all that DC money would have just went to the municipality, so they don't really care whether or not it's reflected in the price. There's no sense in trying to capture any portion of it, because if it impedes in the ability to get a sale, then it impedes in their ability to collect revenue. But you had another interesting thought on kind of like reputationally what it means for you and for the development community to be stepping up and doing this. And I'm just wondering if you could discuss that. Like, why else might a developer, beyond the sort of economic incentive I just explained, why else might a developer be incentivized to do what you guys are all doing?
yeah, I mean, if you look at the development industry deeply, you're going to notice a few things. One of which is there's a lot of long-term players in this business. There are families who've been building here for 80 years, 70 years, 50 years. You see a lot of them on their logos. They've been in business for 50 years. Reputation is everything in this business. It is everything. And so by us doing this public coalition and this public pledge, putting our names, putting our logos, putting our signatures on it, we wanted to show people that we had skin in the game. We were putting our reputations on the line because I knew that this was going to be a criticism. This is always a criticism. Oh, developers are just going to pocket the profit. Everybody seems to think that, it's developer greed is the problem. And I think that's driven by, uninformed or politicians who have purposely tried to kind of sow these seeds of doubt within the industry that, we're the bad guys. And, I've been in this business for 15 years. I've worked for multiple developers. I've partnered with many others. Never met bad guys like that. I've never dealt with anyone who's been so greedy and they care nothing about their customer. They care nothing about anyone else. They only care about, making a profit. I've never met a single person like that yet. There's certainly a spectrum, but there's a lot of people love building in this city. They feel it's a responsibility to build in this city. They feel it's a privilege to build in this city. And so when you're putting your reputation on the line there, you're really saying, like, if we don't do the right thing, there's an opportunity for the public to challenge us and call into question our reputations. And when you value that with your life, I think that's a meaningful amount of skin in the game to show people we're serious. So we wanted to do something like that. And the people who signed the pledge, because they all believe it, were very, very open about making this a public thing. So, and look, people can believe us or not, but when I don't have a project in Vaughan, unfortunately, so I can't show those savings yet. But the second we see savings in Toronto, I promise you, you can come into one of my sales offices and you'll be able to see immediately the price difference. And we're actually working on kind of a formatting and a document that we can show buyers. Here was the previous price. Here's the new price. And thank your government for that. Your government were the ones who stepped up and made the difficult choices that were necessary to bring this market back. And so they should get the credit, if they do the right thing. And we will happily give them the credit.
Yeah, I just want to jump in on the misconception there for a second. And I think it's such a common misconception, right? The greedy developer, the wealthy developer. But really, I think that has kind of perpetuated and almost spiraled out of control over the last couple of years. And I think that misconception comes from housing in general just being so expensive, right? To do a renovation, to put a basement suite in, the cost has jumped 5, 10x in the past number of years. So when you exacerbate that and think, okay, well, it's this much to put a pool in or put a basement in or to even buy a house now, I can only imagine the people at, the top, which would be the developers who are doing this on a large scale. Well, they must be taking home all the profits, but it really isn't the case, is it, Matt? Right? I mean, I think you've mentioned already, and we spoke about this before, that the government really is the main breadwinner when it comes to any form of development, especially here in Ontario.
Absolutely, and that's been our position all along since we started this. We looked at, when I started in the business in 2009, I talked about it was 12% of the cost of a home were taxes. And I dusted off an old pro forma from way back then and normalized it so it was apples to apples with a project today. And 12% was the number. It was roughly $36,000 on average per condo. So that's like a blend between one bedrooms, probably a little bit less, and two bedrooms a little bit more, but blended on average about $36,000 in total tax. Today, it's over $240,000. So there's over $200,000 in straight tax that is being charged on a home, to the same home today as what was charged 15 years ago. So that $700,000 condo that you're looking at, starter condo, could cost $500,000 today if the governments were willing to pull back on some of these taxes. And I think that's a meaningful difference in terms of affordability. Now, it's not just government. There has been construction cost increases and other things, but you got to remember that labor costs have gone up, supply of materials has gone up. There's a whole bunch of things. And at the end of the day, every cost input that goes into a project has to be absorbed by the end buyer, every single one of them. So when labor rates go up, they're absorbing those costs. When the supply of concrete and steel goes up, they're absorbing those costs. When my appliances get more expensive, they're absorbing those costs. And when the taxes go up, they're absorbing those costs. I think developers do a really good job of trying to manage costs and trying to, negotiate hard and, try and keep things in line. But it's really been like a battle of attrition, I'd say, over the last 15 years that we've been losing. And we're now at the point where the system's broken and we don't have another option other than to get really vocal about this issue. And thankfully, I think everybody across the country is starting to recognize this issue, because all of the public sentiment I see online when, Pierre Poilievre, for example, came out with his proposal on GST, or Stephen Del Duca, who was the first, it's a big city mayor who did something meaningful in terms of dropping development charges. They're getting praised for these policies. People like these policies. So I think it's only a matter of time, hopefully, until cities like Toronto do their part and the province of Ontario steps up and does their part, and hopefully the current federal government does their part.